Deep Threat Sports Network, welcome back. I'm pumped. I know you guys love this episode because you guys want to know about our Heisman guys. You guys want to know what our top 25 is because I know you guys, you like to see something different than the AP top 25 sometimes. But we're also going to revisit those conference picks we talked about last week. We're going to talk about who would move up or down, kind of what that would look like after this weekend, after a crazy weekend. But right off the bat, we're going to talk Heisman. But before we get to Heisman, I'm going to go ahead and let you guys know Bryant is out currently still. Work. You know, you got to get things done. But he'll be back with us. So no stress there. No worry. He'll be back. And we're gonna let him pick on himself next week when we start talking about the Heisman.
Dave, this man's working hard. You're working hard. I'm working hard. We need our fans to pick up the pace for us so we can do this full time and work hard on this all the time. Could you imagine the content we'd be able to provide everybody if this was our full-time jobs and not on the side for us? My goodness, I feel like we give some of the best content around, not trying to be biased, but man, could you imagine if we were doing this full-time? Goodness gracious, we'd really have some stuff for you.
Absolutely. But until then, we're gonna keep rocking it out as best we can. If we gotta sub people in, if we gotta, just be up down to person, hey, we're just like them Oregon Ducks. We're gonna soar high and above everybody else. We're gonna let it happen, and we're gonna have clutch plays.
Hey, we adapt and overcome. We adapt and overcome adversity, Dave. We don't stop.
Absolutely. But hey, let's hit right to it because I'm ready. I know you guys love the Heisman talk, but hey, I'm coming. I did some research on Collin's two of Collin's folks, and I'm ready to come down their throats and down Collin's throat. So I know you guys want to hear about it. But
well, Colin, since you're so since you're so ready for mine, go ahead and lead off with yours, and then we can spend more time on mine since you think yours are so great.
All right, hear me out. So I got Ashton Jeanty. I mean, I don't even. There's no point in bringing up his stats because they're just ridiculous. Regardless, 1,248 yards, 17 touchdowns, single-handedly carrying Boise State to the national championship. Possibly, I don't know. At this point, nothing's out of the picture for Ashton Jeanty. He is just that guy. And then two, Dillon Gabriel showed up, put OSU down in the dirt. I mean, he's just a dog, man. He went 100. I mean, career. Let's just talk about this year. 153 for 201, 76.1% passing, almost 10 yards short of 1,800 yards, 13 touchdowns. Yes, he's got 3 interceptions. I think that may be the least amount of interceptions that any quarterback has in college football right now.
Except the one I'm about to bring to you, but go ahead.
28 carries, 103 yards, and 4 touchdowns. I mean, the guy is just solid all the way around. And again, he has played some good games. He played Boise State. He played Ashton Jeanty. And he's just the guy has a granted this was his best game. But I think when you were on that high there, you just keep riding it out because Oregon arguably probably played their hardest game of the season in Ohio State University. But my number three, and I'm gonna be flat out. He just got good numbers. And he's played well, but again, he doesn't play a whole lot of big games this year. So I take that into account because, other than Ashton Jeanty, if you're putting up big numbers against no-name schools, it is what it like. If you're a Heisman player, you're putting up big numbers against quality players and teams. Yes. Anybody, if you're playing a crappy defense, yeah, anybody can throw, 3-5 touchdowns. But if you're playing in Ohio State University and you have that game that Dillon Gabriel have, hey, power to you. But Cam Ward is my number 3, and University of Miami doesn't have that difficult of a schedule this year. But even with that, he's 148 for 214 on the season, 69.2% passing, over 2,000 yards. I think he's got like 2,200 and some change. 20 touchdowns, but again, that's followed up with 5 interceptions. So, you look at like for every 4 touchdowns, he's throwing an interception. But he does have 28 carries, 161 yards, and 3 touchdowns. But like I said, I still think I just want him to get tested. I want him to play a good quality defense, and I want to see how he does.
I mean, if you take his whole number into consideration, though, 214 passing attempts and only 5 picks, that's pretty damn good odds, Dave. I mean, that's taking care of the football. I think he's just had more bonehead plays than he has interceptions, and that's kind of what comes to mind a little bit with Cam Ward. But what's so funny about your Dylan Gabriel pick, Dave, since you're going to pick on mine, I'm going to go ahead and rail your ass right here for a second. You talk shit on Dylan Gabriel, you talk shit on Ashton Genty, and look who's at your number one and your number two. Listen to your guy, me, right here, early and often. I had you on these guys from the get-go. Give credit where it's due to these fellas, man. I like that you have met your 1, 2. Real chalky here, though, Dave. You took the number 1, 2, and 3 off the odds board. Really went out on a limb here, didn't you, pal? I'm real proud of you, though. But you talked about Dylan Gabriel playing Boise State when all you did early on in the season was ride Boise State and their schedule's ass. Man, I tell you what, Dave, I'm just going to keep it brief. I'm not going to get too deep on you right here. I'm just going to let you have your moment. I'm just really anxious to hear what you had to say about mine. You talked about how you think Dylan Gabriel is leading the league with the least amount of interceptions. Well, guess what? I'm going to get to my number 2 because you already talked about Ashton Genty, and of course, he's been on my list since week 1. And of course, he's been on my number 1 since like week 3. And he does have 1,248 yards, 17 touchdowns, was minus 6,000 to score a touchdown this last week. So if you took that, you have balls that clank. What a bet by you. But hey, it hit. No doubts there. 17 touchdowns, Dave. Think about that. 17 touchdowns. Wow. All right. But my number 2, Dave. And if you say something stupid, Dave, I'm going to come through this camera because Curtis Rourke, like I said last week, is the best quarterback in the Big Ten right now. This is not up for discussion. I think he's one of the best quarterbacks in the country right now. 1,752 yards, 2 interceptions. Do I think he is number 2 right now in odds? Matter of fact, no, I know he's not number 2 right now in odds. That's why I'm bringing him to you early, like I did Ashton Genty, so you can get a little taste of this Curtis Rourke money while it's so juicy. I don't remember I think it was like plus 6,000 or something crazy right now for him. And yes, I know he's the quarterback for Indiana, but let's look at Indiana right now, Dave. They're undefeated. They have Michigan, Nebraska, and Ohio State remaining on this schedule. Curtis Rourke can truly win this Heisman Trophy award, especially if Indiana goes 2-1 in those 3 football games throughout that stretch, and they end this season somehow at 10-2 or 11-1, and they're in Big Ten conversations and they're in playoff conversations. Curtis Rourke can win this award. So you better come at me with something good right here if you're going to bring it to me, because Curtis Rourke's the real damn deal right now. So I'm anxious to see what you have to say.
Well, let's talk about Curtis Rourke before you get.
Hang on, is this going to be one of those deals where you talk mad shit on my picks, and then 2 weeks from now you got him on your top 3 list again?
No, because Ashton Genty is just a statistical anomaly. He's just different. And Dylan Gabriel, I was high on him earlier in the first 2 episodes. I was high on Dylan Gabriel. I talked about how Dylan Gabriel
Dave,
the quarterback.
And I quote you 3 weeks ago. Ashton Genty is just not going to win this award. There's just no way. He's just not going to win it. So, yeah, that's what you're saying about Curtis Rourke right now, too.
Okay, yes, but listen, Ashton Genty is actually. Look, here's my thing. Ashton Genty.
Oh, I'm listening.
Ashton Genty does not depend on anybody but himself. Yes, Boise State. I'm not saying they're a bad offensive line, but man, the guy can just run through anything. But then, when you're a quarterback, one, you've got to depend on your offensive line to give you that time to release the ball. 2, you got to have quality receivers that can compete with quality defenses. And I don't know that Indiana has that. And then 2, can he run the ball? I haven't watched him much, but that's my thing. It's just I just think for a quarterback, you have so many more variables that play into this versus Ashton Genty. You give him the ball and he's going to get, 10, 15 yards every time versus when you're a quarterback, if your receivers are not picking up the ball, there goes your stats. If your guys just don't have the speed to get separation, there it goes. That's why, when they do go to Michigan, when they do go to Nebraska, when they do go to Ohio State, how is the rest of his team going to do? Yes, he can throw dimes.
They're better than Michigan. They're better than Nebraska.
Yeah, I agree.
The only game I think they do have trouble with is Ohio State. And I don't remember off the top of my head if that's a home or an away game. But hear me out. We're halfway through the season right now. They've played 6 games, Dave. If he wraps this up at roughly around, call it 3,400 yards just for easy matches, doubling what he has right now, 28 touchdowns and 4 interceptions, and Indiana's 11-1 or 10-2 with a win against Michigan, a win against Ohio State, a win against Nebraska, a win against Maryland. I mean, you add all these teams that he's beat along the way, you add this on his resume, and you have it with 1 or 2 losses, and Indiana's in conversation. Dude, his name is up there. His name is in serious conversations to win this award with numbers like that, especially because Indiana had 0 hype before this season started. I don't remember what their win total was, but it wasn't very good, and they are riding hot right now because of him. He is taking them to these heights right now. Curtis Rourke is. I mean, transfers in and absolutely makes things happen for this football team. That's why he's my number 2. Do I
Collin,
truly think he's number 2 right now? No, but I also didn't want to be super chalky with my picks. I think Cam Ward, to your defense, should probably be the actual number 2 as it sits. And I think the way the odds sit, he's number 2 or number 3 along with Dylan Gabriel. So I think as it sits right now, you have him right. But I'm telling you, I think my 3 on this list, I truly think my 3 can be in very, very serious conversations at the end of the season, which leads me to my number 3 at Garrett Nussmeier. Garrett Nussmeier has 9.
let me
What you
pause you
got?
because I still want to talk about Rourke. I mainly because I know you talked about what they have lying ahead, but let's talk about what they've done to this point to be undefeated. I looked at their schedule. I did some digging. Every team Indiana has faced this year has at least 3 losses, Collin. Has at least 3.
Correct.
And
Correct.
their best game was against a UCLA team that is 1-4 currently.
Correct. But
None
hey,
of these games are quality wins. None of them. Not a single one
okay,
of them. They just haven't
you're
played
right. You're right. But they beat Florida International 31-7. They beat Western Illinois 77-3. They beat UCLA 42-13. They beat Charlotte 52-14. They beat Maryland 42-28, and they beat Northwestern 41-24. They're not allowing these teams to stay in these games. That's why I still give them credit and respect what they've done. If they were 6-0 and they're winning, nut cutters by 3 points, 1 possession, they don't have a 1 possession win yet. I mean, they are curb stomping these teams. They are taking care of business. Maryland, Northwestern, and UCLA, if you would have talked to anybody before the season, most people probably would have had Indiana dropping 2 of those for sure, 1 of those in those 3 games, and they didn't even make them 1 possession games. They're taking care of business. That's why we
So
have
is
to
everybody else.
recognize that.
So is everybody. Everybody else taking care of business
No,
against these teams
no,
too because they have 3
no.
losses.
They're just winning those games. They're not taking care of business. I mean, taking care of business is going in, never giving their opponent a chance, and that's what they're doing. Curtis Works not turning the ball over in these games to allow these other teams to hunt around and stay in the game late. He's taking care of the football. They're protecting the rock. He's really led the coaching staff, the fans, everybody around him at Indiana to believe in him and elevate them to new heights. So just stay tuned. Maybe I will be wrong on this one. I can be wrong on this one because I nailed the Ashton Jam. I hit that shit out of the park since week 1. So maybe I'm stroking myself here, and I throw another flyer out here with Curtis Work, and I'm just going to keep riding that. I think Curtis Work can really take care of business. They got Nebraska, Washington, Michigan State up next in the next 3 games, and I think he lights the scoreboard up in all 3 of those games too. I mean, you want me to be honest with you? I think they're 9-0 going into Michigan. I think they're 10-0 going to Ohio State. So if Curtis Work's doing those things, man, look out, off to the races. I'm going to get on to my 3rd one now because I'm sure you got some smart-ass comment to say about this next one too, and I'll listen to you more on this one than I will the Curtis Work one. But my number 3, Garrett Nussmeier, he has 1,989 yards, 18 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. He's got Texas A&M, Alabama, and Vandy on the schedule remaining. It's so funny still that we're mentioning the name Vandy here, but my Lord, they've really played themselves into the equation. But Dave, Garrett Nussmeier's taking care of business too. I know he didn't have the best performance this last week. We talked about that on our last episode, but he still did enough to win the football game. He still threw the game-winning touchdown pass in overtime to give LSU the win. Like you talked about on that episode, they were never out in front in that football game. You never saw Nussmeier get nervous. You never saw Nussmeier fall apart. You never saw Nussmeier hang his head and not believe. He kept getting back up on the horse, riding it, and goes and wins the football game when he has the chance to win it. That's what Heisman winners do. Kind of like Cam Ward. I'll give you that too on Cam Ward. Cam Ward does just enough to win football games and doesn't lose them. That's what you have to do to be a Heisman frontrunner. I think Garrett Nussmeier is doing it. And, man, those stats don't lie either. Almost 2,000 yards and 18 touchdowns. He can really do this damn thing down the stretch, Dave. Kyron Lacy, let's not forget, Kyron Lacy is really helping him out too because that's a true number 1.
So I mean, right off the bat, you're 2 and 3. Both of these teams, Indiana and LSU, one thing they have in common is that these guys have put up good numbers against a 1-4 UCLA team. Both of these players have played against UCLA,
Do
but
you think Cam? Hey, hang on real quick. Hang on. You think Cam Ward was going to take care of business in those games, or do you think he'd get a
no,
referee to help him out to get a win?
no,
Because
I
they
think
should have two. They should have two losses. They should have
no,
two losses.
100%. I agree, and that's why he's my number 3 because I just don't see him. The only reason I have him there is because yes, they're undefeated. Yes, they're in the ACC. They got some hard matchups.
They're
Realistically,
winning one possession games against Cal, Dave. LSU's winning one possession games against the top ranked Ole Miss. These guys are not the same.
no, and that's my thing. Like I said, Cam at my number 3. You know, it just kind of there. I just had to put somebody there. But I mean, if you're Garrett Nussmeier, you're running for Heisman front runner. You don't have 2 interceptions against South Alabama. South Alabama. No one knows where that's at. Do you know where that's at, Collin?
Yeah, South Alabama.
All right, and hey, let's see how good the St. Louis area public school district is. Collin, what's 18 divided by 6?
3.
3-1. For every 3 touchdowns that Garrett Nussmeier throws, there is an interception. That's not good numbers. That's just not good, dude. I mean, if you're a Heisman guy, 18 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, and the only quality game really is South Carolina other than Ole Miss, which, quick spoiler, they're not a top 25 team any longer. They are not.
Neither was your Cal win for Cam Ward.
100%. I agree, and that's why I'm saying why I don't think Garrett Nussmeier is a Heisman contender. Shoot, keep Quinn Ewers up there, even with the injury.
They've played in 3 harder games, and Cam Ward's played in 1.
Hey,
They've played USC, South Carolina, Ole Miss. What in the hell does Cam Ward do against those teams? He's got 5 interceptions against whack-ass opponents, and you're going to talk about the interceptions?
listen, I'll give you that Garrett Nussmeier deserves it more than Cam Ward. But that still doesn't mean that
Garrett Nussmeier at your number 3 then.
Hey,
I'm gonna have your top 3 looking exactly like my top 3 for this is all said and done. Keep it coming, baby. Come on. Keep it coming.
Man, before I lose this battle here, let's go ahead and talk about our conference pick. Let's go ahead and switch to these conference picks. So, Collin, we're going to review our conference picks from last week, but here, I'm going to give you a challenge here. You can't add or subtract anybody. You got to keep those same 4. Just shift them around based on the weekend. Let's go ahead and start off with one of the most competitive conferences in the United States of America, the Southeastern Conference. Collin, how do your 3, kind of play out?
Yeah, so midway through the season, after the first 6 weeks, I had Georgia at 1, Ole Miss at 2, Texas at 3, and Texas A&M at 4. We've told you here on this show before, hey, when we're wrong, we're wrong. We're going to get out in front of it, and we're going to tell you that we were wrong. I was wrong about Ole Miss. I knew I was wrong about Ole Miss because last Friday's episode, I came out and said, take LSU. I'm an idiot. I should have listened to myself. I should have thought about this ahead. I had Ole Miss winning this football game early in the week last week. I shifted midweek, did some more digging, leaned to LSU. So having Ole Miss at 2, yeah, that's just not going to happen anymore. They really let me down. That offense has really looked to kind of, I can't say gone stale, but it's a little stagnant right now, and they're not really impressing me too much. To be honest, Dave, I would shuffle this up a lot. I would have Texas at 1, Georgia at 2, A&M at 3, and Ole Miss at 4. If I can only use
so you would have what I had last week, is what you're telling
me. yeah. You right now you look right. Right now you look right. I wouldn't have Bama at 4. You have Bama at 4. I'd get them the hell out though. I would definitely. The way you know what I'm not even gonna say who I would add because we can't. We're using the 4 that we got. And Ole Miss would be sitting comfortably at my number 4 if it was just these 4 teams. I really think this Georgia-Texas game coming up, obviously, is going to decide the SEC, I think. But I really do like that we both have Texas A&M in our top 4 because I think Texas A&M can really make some things happen going forward. I talked earlier on how I think Texas A&M beats Texas in the season. I'm still going to hold true to that. So I really do think Texas A&M can be a top 3 team in the SEC come the end of this season. I just wish I would have thought more about it. I thought I did such good research on this. I'm upset with myself. I try not to miss very often because I feel like I don't miss very often. And man, I gotta reevaluate the Ole Miss expectations because they look like shit.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not even going to go into mine. I mean, Collin's new changes is literally mine. I had Texas 1, Georgia 2, A&M 3, Bama 4. Again,
Man, that's disgusting that you got that right, and I missed on that, Dave.
yeah, I mean, I wasn't. Ole Miss just didn't impress me even before this weekend. Um, Texas, they're taking care of business. Georgia, as of now, is taking care of business. They're maybe it was just a fluke. Who knows? But they did lose to Bama. But again, Bama, if you saw them over the weekend, didn't look very impressive either. So that's why I have them
No,
down so far. And
no.
I
Bama
think,
wouldn't be in my top 4 if we were remaking our top 4 with the new picks, which we told ourselves we're not going to allow us to do that. But yeah, Bama wouldn't be in my top 4 either. The
uh,
SEC is cannibalizing from the inside, man. The parity in the SEC is crazy, and that's one thing I want to ask you before we get out of here off the SEC topic is, are all teams in the SEC just really good this year, or is the SEC kind of down? Like, what do you think it is? Like, I hate to sound like an SEC homer, but Dave, I just think all the SEC teams are good this year. Like, truly, I think they're all very, very competitive. Mississippi State, obviously not very good, but Mississippi State sat there and scored 31 points on Georgia. So, I mean, to do something like that, I mean, they really ramp it up against conference opponents. All these teams do. They want that. They want to beat the conference opponents more than they want to beat anybody else.
yeah. So, Colin, I think, and I talked about this earlier in the year, and I try not to put too far down this rabbit hole, but I really do think it's NIL has changed the landscape of the game as well as the 12-team playoff, because now you got a 12-team playoff. Everybody thinks they got a chance. Vanderbilt thinks they got a chance. Everyone believes they have a chance. And
Vanderbilt's got a chance.
when you give somebody that hope, they're going to show up. Versus when we had a 14 playoff, let's be real. If you get one loss, you're out. That's it. You're done.
Yeah. Yeah, and
Versus,
I think there is some truth to that. I think these teams know that even with one loss, hell, even 2 losses, if it's to the right teams, they can still get back. They can still find their way into the playoffs. So, I mean, there's
and,
probably some truth to what you're saying on that.
and then even NIL, why would you go, be a backup at, I don't know, let's say Texas. Why would you go be a backup at Texas? Versus let's go to Vanderbilt and let's win.
Hey,
Let's
I'm with you, man.
let's get a big paycheck. I'm going to get the play, and I think it just has kind of leveled the playing field a lot more, because you're not going to have a potential first rounder going to be sitting on your bench unless you're University of Texas.
Well, and just a theory I kind of had about this when I was sitting around kind of thinking about this is these guys are really playing for money now too. Like, to your point, I mean, they're sitting around and they know that even if their team's not good, well, they're probably going to transfer out if their team's not good, but they want to play good so they can get more money and get better offers. So, I mean, I think it elevates the play for most of these guys. So yeah, I think we've kind of been on that from the get-go, and I think that's really holding true right now with the expanded playoffs, with the NIL. It's really motivated these guys and gave them a whole new, liking to what they need to get done. But real quick, too, we'll go over Bryant's 4. We're not going to pick on any of his picks since Bryant's not here to defend himself or his picks. But, hey, his SEC picks look great. He had Texas, Georgia, Bama, A&M. So you and him were very similar. I'm kind of shifting to your guys' likings. He does have Bama ahead of A&M, which I would be inclined to agree with you at having A&M at 3 and Bama at 4. And Bryant's a really smart guy with this stuff. I'm sure he would probably agree to that, too, after this last week. But, Dave, get us over to the Big Ten.
Man, Big Ten. I'm gonna go ahead and go straight from Bryant in the SEC to Bryant in the Big Ten, because when I looked at his I think that's what I got. That's what I think is an accurate Big Ten picture. He's got Ohio State at number 1. He's got Oregon at number 2. He's got Penn State at number 3, and Indiana at number 4. Now, Ohio State, Oregon, again, it was such a competitive game. I didn't see it was just a good game of good teams. That could 5 minutes later, you could convince me Oregon. 5 minutes later, you can convince me Ohio State. And that's why I think his is the most accurate out of all of us. So I'll go ahead and knock on mine. I had Ohio State at number 1. Yes, I still think they're number 1. Penn State is not a number 2. The only reason I wouldn't put them below Indiana is because I already talked about how Indiana hasn't played anybody yet. So that's why I have Penn State at number 2, and then Oregon at number 3. Oregon for sure leapfrogs Penn State without a doubt. And Indiana, unless they can win out, I don't know how this plays out for them. But Collin, you're big on Indiana, so tell me, what is yours moving like?
Well, not shifting Oregon to your number one after winning that game is still asinine. I mean, Oregon goes to number one for me. I have Penn State, Ohio State, Oregon, Indiana. That was it going into week 7 after the first 6 weeks. Right now, I would shift Oregon to number one, Penn State 2, Ohio State 3, Indiana 4. Those are my top 4 that I would have set up now in the Big Ten. Very comfortable with that. I think Indiana does have a tough schedule ahead along the way. A little bit, it's going to ramp up for them. But I do think they beat Michigan. I do think they beat Nebraska, and I think they do lose the Ohio State game, which would have me having Ohio State over them. But yeah, Oregon looks to be the Big Ten front runner right now after a big win like that. They got their hardest game over with. Penn State still has Ohio State on the schedule, and that to me is their only real roadblock. Otherwise, I think Penn State is my number one. Like I'm giving it to Oregon now because Oregon just had the best win of the season, but I still think Penn State's my number one, man. I'm not giving up on Penn State. You guys aren't going to talk me out of Penn State. They still took care of business when they had to and won the football game. Penn State's a good team, man. They play. What's crazy about them is they kind of play to the level of their opponent. So I think at Ohio State game where they host Ohio State, you're going to see Happy Valley off the hook, man. It's going to be absolutely ape shit. They're going to make it tough for Will Howard. If Will Howard had a tough time at Oregon, Will Howard's going to have a real tough time at Penn State. You kind of saw Andy Kotelnicki and James Franklin feel like maybe they were unlocking Drew Aller a little bit. Looked like they might have been taking the leash off a little bit and allowing Drew Aller to do some big things. And Tyler Warren's, dude, he's as real as it gets as a playmaker for any team in the country. So I mean, and Penn State's defense is good. I talked about it here, last episode. Penn State's good, man. Get on them while you can. I know their win wasn't the most convincing, but they still won the football game, man. I mean, if we're going to talk about Miami in a little bit being the number one team in our ACC, you better be talking about Penn State being the number one in the Big Ten, at least the number 2, because they're taking care of business and they're winning games. That's all that matters at the end of the day. Nobody cares how you won games at the end of the day. If your loss column's a 0 or a 1, nobody cares how you lost those, or nobody cares how you won those games, not lost them, because they're not there in your loss column. I've already
Yeah,
moved on from Miami having narrow margin victories. I've already moved on from any team having narrow margin victories because they still won the damn game.
Collin. Yeah, but that's if you're looking back, man. If you're a top 10 team, a top 5 team at that, you're always looking forward because you got something coming up. You got something coming up. But hey, maybe I hope I'm wrong. I hope Penn State goes out and crushes it. But I want to talk about the Big 12, Collin. Let's talk about the Big 12. Who do you? How did your picks move on the Big 12, Collin? I want to hear yours before I talk about mine because let's talk about it. When we talked about the Big 12, Texas Tech is 5-1, and none of us have them even up there.
Yeah, man, we talked about that last week when we introduced these. I mentioned it as we were kind of moving on from the Big 12. I remember it. I was just like, hey, are we not giving Texas Tech the credit they deserve? But man, Texas Tech, we have these based on where we think they're going to go throughout the rest of the season. I don't think Texas Tech's in here at the rest of the season. They may be in the top 4 because if I could eliminate Utah off my list, I would. I would blow them right off this list. Cam Rising done. Excuse me. Cam Rising looked terrible. Jesus, man. Utah, what in the hell? Maybe they're just not good. Maybe they're just not good. Maybe we just missed. It's time to move on from Utah. You'll find out later. Spoiler alert. They are completely off our top 25. We will never bring them up again because this Cam Rising ordeal has been a train wreck. He comes back in this game, looks like he's never played football before. It was just a really bad game against Arizona State, who I don't think is a very good football team. They only have one loss too, but that's another team that I just don't think is very good. And K-State at my number 1, Iowa State at my number 2, BYU at my number 3. Like I said, Utah at my number 4. Utah's going to stay at my number 4 because we have to keep them based on your rules. And I do like this. This is really neat by you, by the way, by making us rearrange the 4 that we have. I would probably put BYU at my number 1, Dave. I said it here last week. I just can't find myself getting in on the BYU experience. But I think it's time. I think it's time for me to be a part of the BYU train. I think BYU goes to my number 1. I think Iowa State goes to my number 2. And I think K-State slides down to my number 3. I would shuffle my top 3. I really would. I think Iowa State stays at 2, BYU 1, K-State 3. Yeah, I mean, I think that's what happens. I really do. The K-State-Iowa State game, it's going to be a huge game, going to have huge Big 12 playoff implications. BYU, his hardest 2 games ahead is Oklahoma State and Utah. I didn't think BYU would pull those games off, but the more I watch BYU and the more I watched them this last week, BYU is going to win both those football games. And I don't think it's going to be tough for them. I think you might see BYU go 12-0. Did we ever think we would say that?
Dude, I mean, I'm looking at it now, and as you were saying, I was like, holy crap. I was like,
sorry for the cough there, Dave. Didn't mean to interrupt you. The whole household's got strep throat, so this is like my Michael Jordan flu game.
But yeah, I mean, BYU's hardest games are Oklahoma State and Utah, and I think they win both of them, especially now that Utah's out. So if anything, they're going to be 11-1 at worst, I feel like. So I'm like, crap. Okay, like I didn't even before you said that, I didn't even have. I thought so. I'll go ahead and talk about my picks. I have Iowa State at number 1, or these were my last week's picks, and I had BYU at 2, Kansas State at 3, and then Utah at 4. I'll keep Utah at 4 for sure. If I could even cut my list to 3, I would.
100%.
I'm gonna follow my own rules. But man, I mean, Iowa State, I had them at. I thought my list was good, but then I look at it, I'm like, yeah, BYU is probably gonna win out, so they got to be a number 1. But then I would still put Iowa State above Kansas State. I will say that. But again, that's gonna be one of those games where they're gonna figure it out. It's going to be a straight up matchup, and whoever wins, hey, have at it.
Let me ask you this. If BYU goes 12-0, K-State goes 11-1, and Iowa State goes 11-1, is there any chance in hell all 3 of those teams can make the playoffs with how all the other conferences shape up? I don't think there is. I don't think they put 3 Big 12 teams in the playoffs. I know that sounds asinine, but man, if you're 12-0, 11-1, and 11-1, obviously one of those teams would have, maybe be 13-0 or however it shakes out in the Big 12 championship. I think the 2 teams that get to the Big 12 championship can make the playoffs, though. I don't think they get 3, but I think they get 2, especially if BYU goes in at 12-0 and let's say Kansas State goes in at 11-1 and Kansas State then beats BYU and they both end this season at 12-1. I think they both make it, Dave.
I think 2 make it. I don't think 3. I think 3 would really be stretching because, man, I mean, the Big Ten has to have 2.
The 3 is a stretch. I think the Big Ten gets 3, and I think the SEC gets 3. I think that's almost a guarantee, unless the SEC continues to cannibalize like they are right now.
Dude, you could give the SEC 4, and I don't know that a whole lot of people would be upset about it.
Well, they would be because there's a lot of SEC haters out there, but like I said earlier, I think the SEC just has higher level of play and competition across the board from top to bottom right now, and I think that's why we're seeing some of these results that we're seeing. I'm kind of shocked to see it, rather than just saying, wow, the SEC is down. These top SEC teams are having troubles with the bottom SEC teams. I think you should probably just take a step back and be like, damn, maybe the SEC is just playing high level football across the board.
Yeah, man, I agree. It's just, I mean, listen, like whether you like it or not, SEC is the premier conference in college football. I mean, look at it. It's just competitive all the way around. And there's good teams. There's a lot of good teams. There's not a whole lot of bad teams in the SEC this year. And times past, hey, yeah, I'm with you, Nick Saban. Vanderbilt's not a hard place to play. Now it is. But yeah. I mean, I think Big 12 gets 2.
Dude, BYU is I think the only team in the country with 2 top 25 wins so far. They beat SMU and they beat K-State. And their schedule ahead, like I said, their hardest 2 games is Oklahoma State and Utah, who both look to be on the ropes right now, reeling. And they have an Arizona State team who's playing out of pocket right now, playing a little better than we expected. But, I mean, I think they're smooth sailing. Their roadblocks are over. They got through SMU. They got through Arizona. They got through K-State. Hey, I mean, they might get this damn thing done all the way. But Bryant's Big 12 picks were Iowa State, Kansas State, BYU, Utah. I also think Bryant would probably move BYU, especially to his number 2 behind Iowa State. I know he's high on Iowa State like we are as well, maybe above Iowa State. Don't want to speak for him, but I would imagine it'd be Iowa State, BYU sitting there at 1A and 1B and Kansas State at 3. And he'd probably agree with us that just blow Utah off this whole entire list if we could.
Absolutely. But listen, Collin, let's go ahead and hit the ACC because I know you want to talk about the ACC. I know you want to talk about Miami. So let me go ahead and tell you what my 4 were. Or you know what? Let's go ahead and hit Brian. Let's hit Brian. Ryan's were number 1 Clemson, number 2 Miami, number 3 SMU, and number 4 Pitt. Mine, on the other hand, were Miami at number 1, SMU at number 2, Pitt at number 3, and Clemson at number 4. I personally, from my list, I would swap Pitt and Clemson. I'd probably still keep Miami, SMU as they are. I don't know, maybe even move SMU above Miami, honestly. But I think Miami, SMU, Clemson, then Pitt, because I do agree with you, Collin. Pitt is like a glass
They're
house.
vulnerable,
They're
man.
waiting to break.
They're vulnerable. Yeah, they are. They're gonna bust at some point. And their schedule ahead, I don't think, if I remember correctly, wasn't very tough. But I don't care who's on it. Pitt's a very vulnerable football team. That's why I didn't even have a. If you remember correctly, I didn't even have a fourth on my list, and I still don't want to add a fourth. I mean, we can't anyway. But I feel comfortable with the 3 I have. This is a 3-horse race. I don't think it's competitive anywhere else. But I mean, so mine was Miami, Clemson, SMU. I'm still going to keep Miami, Clemson, SMU. I think as it sits right now, I feel comfortable that I'm kind of all over this ACC race. Miami still has Louisville on the schedule ahead. I think they might play them this coming week. I think gonna be a tough game for Miami. They've kind of, like we talked about earlier and many times on this show now, they've been on the ropes a couple times. Virginia Tech's had them there. Cal's had them there. Louisville's a good football team. Tyler Shuck's a good quarterback for Louisville. Can Louisville get them on the ropes, and can Louisville win this game at home against Miami? That could really shake things up in the ACC. Clemson at my number 2. They still have Virginia Tech, Pitt, and South Carolina on the schedule. That South Carolina game doesn't mean too much in this conference race because South Carolina is an SEC opponent. So, I mean, they have Virginia Tech and Pitt. I think they win both those games. I think Clemson's shown their worst against Georgia and off to the races since then. And like we said last week, I think they kind of have that mentality as, hey, man, we played the big dogs. We played Georgia. We're not scared the rest of the way. We're just going to kick these guys' ass from here on out. They're taking care of business. It's what they're doing. SMU at my number 3, comfortably at my number 3. Their hardest game on the schedule at this Pitt, and I think they kicked the dog shit out of Pitt. So SMU at my number 3, man. I think this ACC is another conference where if you have Miami at 12-0, Clemson at 11-1, SMU at 10-2, man, sorry, the way I see it, SMU at 11-1. Let me fix that. SMU 11-1. So you have 12-0, 11-1, 11-1. Dude, man, this is another conference where you would be having conversations. Are they going to get 2? Are they going to get 3? I mean, how does that play out? I mean, this is getting interesting, Dave. We're halfway through the season, and things are very, very interesting right now. We got a lot of football left, so this whole thing could blow up, but it's interesting right now, and I am extremely excited to see how this plays out.
Man, I agree, man. I
could see any 3 of these teams winning the ACC.
Yeah, how do you leave, an 11-1 SMU out, But here's the thing. Unless we do like a
30, hang on, you leave 11-1 SMU out only because if there's other resumes that stack up better than theirs. If SMU goes 11-1, their toughest game would have been a loss to BYU, a win against
right?
Look at the thumbs up it's giving me because I'm counting. A loss to SMU, a loss to BYU, a win against Louisville, and a win against Pitt. That would be their resume.
Collin, but then you're looking
not very good.
But then you're looking at this as their only losses to an undefeated BYU.
And that's fair. No, and I hear you. I'm just saying, if you stack up resumes when you bring in the Big Ten teams and you bring in the SEC teams into conversation, would you put a 1-loss SMU in over a 2-loss Georgia if they lost to Texas and Alabama? No, I mean, you know what I'm saying? You just got to think about all those scenarios when you really try to break it down to 12 teams. You really got to dive into that shit. I mean, you really got to look at resumes. You really got to look at how that shakes out. And that is kind of where the win-loss might get put to the side just a little bit, depending on who losses are to.
No, I agree. And yeah.
But it's very hard. You're right. It's very hard. They can't help their schedule. I said this earlier on our show. They can't help their schedule. They just play the schedule that they're given. So they cannot help that, Louisville, Pitt were their hardest conference opponent. They can't help that. They just win those games. They took care of business like they were supposed to. Talk about that here a lot. Just something to think about. A 2-loss Georgia get in over a 1-loss SMU. And I think if that's really how it shakes out, I think probably they both get in. But, I mean, Who knows? We don't know how it's going to shake out.
Hey, I tell you what, we do know one team that is going to be in the college football playoff without a doubt, unless something crazy just happens and Ashton Genty gets hurt. Boise State, as you guys have heard me refer to about Boise State.
Man, we talked about that a lot last week. The Navy and Army are going to give them a push. They're going to give them a push for that last playoff spot.
Hey, college football playoff wants Ashton Genty in the college football playoff.
They should. They should. He's the best running back in the country. They should want the best offensive player in the country in the playoffs. They should.
Especially now that they're having to split up their monies, they need a little money coming in, and Ashton Genty is a lot more entertaining to watch. More people want to watch Boise State and Ashton Genty than people want to watch Army or Navy. No disrespect to our service members, but man, you just can't compete with the Boise State and Ashton Genty. I just want to watch the guy run on national television on a college football playoff game. I want to see it.
Man, but you can't tell me watching Army or Navy in the playoffs wouldn't be cool as shit.
Oh man, that would be awesome, and that's what makes a 12-team college football playoff that much more exciting, because you imagine Army plays, I don't know, Texas, and they beat Texas.
Okay, hang on. I got a scenario. This is all hypotheticals, but let's have a little bit of fun with it for a second. Boise State's 11-1, wins the Mountain West Conference. Army, Navy go to play each other on the last game of the season for one another. Navy beats them. Let's say Navy's 12-0. Navy wins their conference. Is there any chance, Dave, that you can see Boise State and Navy both in the playoffs? Since we're talking about how these other conferences can maybe get 2, 3, whatever, let's give credit where it's due. If Navy goes undefeated at 12-0 and Boise State goes 11-1 with their only loss to an Oregon team who's probably going to be the number 1 or 2 team in the country the way it's looking right now, buddy, these both might find their way in. There is a world where they both find their way in, I think.
Oh, man, my thing is it depends on if Boise State just takes care of business on all teams moving forward the rest of the season. I think they will win them all. But if they win them comfortably, like more than one score, and Ashton Genty continues to perform, especially if he wins the Heisman, I think you throw in Boise State ahead of them.
I don't disagree with that. I don't disagree with that at all. I'm just trying to find, is there a world where
both get in?
Yes, because if Navy goes 12-0, they have a win against Memphis, they have a win against Notre Dame at that point, and then they'll have a win against Tulane. You can't leave a 12-0 with a win against Memphis, Notre Dame, Tulane, and Army out of it. You cannot leave that team like that out. You can't.
But hear me out. SEC right off the bat, let's say they get 3, because I really think they deserve it.
They'll get 3. I think
they'll get 3.
There's a world where they get 4.
Big Ten will get 2, so that's 5.
The Big Ten will get 3.
Well,
I think if I'm just gonna throw a dart right off the cuff without looking at anything right now, and I'm gonna rear back and throw a dart and hit this TV right now. The SEC is gonna get 3. The Big Ten's gonna get 3. The Big Ten's gonna get Penn State, Ohio State, and Oregon.
Okay, so that's
the SEC's probably gonna get Texas, Georgia, and they're probably going to sprinkle in a third for sure, whether that ends up being a Bama, a Tennessee, somehow Ole Miss finds their way back into it. I'm sure I'm forgetting somebody right here off the cuffs. The Big 12's got 3 teams that are very eligible to make it right now. The ACC's got 3 eligible teams to make it right now. So that gives you 12, and then we're talking about how 2 from the group of 5, you shave down and you eliminate a SMU and you eliminate a Kansas State, let's say, out of the Big 12, that opens it up for a Boise State and a Navy. I mean, it's possible. A lot of things have to go Navy's way throughout the rest of the season, or Army. I'm giving that all to Navy or Army. A lot of things got to go Army's way throughout the rest of the way to find their way into that conversation. But you can't leave a 12-0 Army or Navy out of it, because they both play Notre Dame, and that's a high caliber win. Speaking of Notre Dame wins against Army and Navy. You're not leaving Notre Dame out, and now they find their way into the playoffs too. Which is they need to join a conference. That shit's bullshit to me. They need to join a conference and not be an independent. I don't like that. Join a conference.
No, I agree. You know what? I agree. I think if you don't want to join a conference, well, you don't get the perks of not being in a conference. You're only going to win if you have an insane record. Because
I think they should have to go 12-0 with that schedule. They should have to go 12-0, and they lost to Northern Illinois.
100%.
I can't get past the Northern Illinois loss.
Yeah, because if you're not a conference team, you're not going to play good. Like, for example, Mizzou, they're going to go out and play SEC teams, week in and week out for the most part. That's a lot harder of a schedule than a Notre Dame team that just kind of handpicked.
Oh, that's so much more taxing on the players throughout the whole entire season. And that is taxing. I mean, that's that wear and tear. The battle in the trenches is much different. I mean, yeah, we could go on for days about what Notre Dame's doing to themselves and how that schedule shakes out and how I think it's kind of horseshit. But I mean, hey, it is what it is. Notre Dame can't help that. The players at Notre Dame can't help that. They're just playing the schedule that they're given. Talking about that earlier. They're just playing the games that are on their schedule. I just feel like they should have went 12-0 with this schedule. But hey, everybody slips up, I guess.
But hey, let's talk about top 25 because that's fun. That one's gonna be fun. So Collin, throw up that top 25 and let's we're not gonna get too crazy into it. We're gonna talk about a little bit, kind of what dilemmas we had, kind of where we have some stuff kind of pop up and stuff that we did or didn't like, and why we kind of shifted people around. So Collin, go ahead and throw that up for us. All right. So right off the bat, Ole Miss is not in our top 25. We did put them in honorable mention just because, hey, it's Ole Miss. They're playing caliber teams. But number 25, we got Diego Pavia and the Vanderbilt Commodores.
Anchor down, baby. Anchor down. Vandy hit
25. Baby.
Welcome to it. Hey, Vandy has some of the best wins on a resume with probably the second worst loss in our top 25 on the resume with the loss to Georgia State. That's pretty bad. That's right up there with Notre Dame's loss to Northern Illinois. But Vandy's got some big wins, baby.
All right. Next, we got Nebraska at 24, Illinois at 23. And then the next three are undefeated teams. We got Pitt 22, Army 21, Navy 20. So they're undefeated. But then right after that, we've got Mizzou at 5-1 at the 19th spot there. We've got Boise State at number 18, 5-1. I mean, hey, maybe 11-1. We'll see. But then we've got SMU at number 17, K-State at 16, 15 Notre Dame. I'm sorry, you should be undefeated, but hey, they're 5-1, so we'll put them at 15 currently.
Hey, an undefeated Notre Dame's in our top 5 right now if they win that Northern Illinois game.
Oh, for sure. I agree 100%. But then Indiana's taking care of business. They're at number 14 because they are 6-0. Tennessee, not impressive. So they're at number 13 for us, even though they are 5-1. Alabama's right ahead of them at number 12, 5-1 as well. Lost to Vanderbilt. This was their week to really come up, but they didn't really do much. So we're putting them at 12. Clemson at 11 at 5-1. Hey, they lost to Georgia, man. We're still going to hang them in there close to that top 10 until they prove us wrong. And then at number 10, we've got Louisiana State University, 5-1. They lost to USC. I don't know how to handle that. So
it's a total LSU thing to do. Lose the first game of the season, roll the rest of the way. I mean, it's just what LSU does. They struggle right off the rip, and then they settle in.
Hey, kind of like Texas A&M, man. That's their number 9. They're 5-1. Their only losses to Notre Dame, and we were just talking about how Notre Dame has to win out if they want to be in the playoffs. But again, A&M, we think highly of them. Mizzou, hey, we're just gonna throw it out there. Mizzou is at number 19, but Mizzou does they do play Texas A&M. But at number 8, we've got Miami undefeated. From this here on out, there's gonna be a lot of undefeated teams. So we got Miami. They're probably gonna steamroll through the ACC. Possibly, I don't know. We'll see. Iowa State 6-0 as well. I'm high on Iowa State. I think Iowa State has the potential to do some major damage. BYU, man. BYU at number 6. Who would have thought that? Halfway through the season, still at number 6, 6-0. They're probably going to be 10-0. Let's be real. We looked at it. We did the math. We did the numbers. Dude, they're probably going to be 10-0.
They're going to be 12-0. Not just 10-0. They're going 12-0.
Man, that's true. They're going 12. I mean, how far up do they move up this list if they're 12-0 at the end of the season? But, hey, number 5, Georgia. I don't know when's the last time Georgia was number 5 on the list, but hey, they were 5-1. They lost to Alabama.
Hey, the last time they were number 5 was when they got left out of the playoffs last year. Whew, sore subject for the Bulldogs fans, but man, the last time they were number 5. It might have been number 6 actually. I don't remember where Florida State and Georgia shook up in that 5-6 match, but whew.
Hey, I knew I could count on you to pick at the Bear there. But number 4, we got Ohio State. Man, it was just a good loss to Oregon, man. You can't fault them for it. That's why they didn't drop off very heavily. Penn State, number 3, 6-0. I talked to Collin about this one, man. I just think Ohio State should be a 3 because they lost to Oregon, and man, Oregon, Ohio State could be interchangeable. Penn State, I'm not big fan of. Drew Aller, you're not that good. Throwing it out there, but hey, we got him
Stop it.
we threw him in number 3. Number 2, man, you can't argue it. And I talked to Collin, man. When you look at their wins, I mean, Oregon and Texas are both undefeated. We got Oregon at 2, Texas at 1. But man, what's bigger? A win against
It's at the
Boise
point
State?
now, though, Dave, where it's 1A and 1B between these two, right?
Oh, 100%. If you look at it, Texas' 2 big wins are Michigan and Oklahoma. Michigan and Oklahoma, we're not very high on. They're not even a top 25 team anymore. Michigan, are they top 25, Colin?
No, they're not. They're not.
Exactly. But then you look at Oregon, and they got the dub against Boise State, and they got the double against Ohio State. Ohio State is currently our number 4 team in the country. Boise State, where are they at? Let's see.
Hey, to your point, I stand corrected earlier too because I said BYU was the only team with 2 top 25 wins, and Oregon is officially another team with Boise State and Ohio State. So, yeah, man, maybe we should slide Oregon above Texas here. I mean, that's the topic of conversation right now. That's yeah.
I will say Texas hasn't done anything to lose their spot. They've taken care of business. They've got the job done. Even let's throw out the fact that they had their starting quarterback be out for what 2-3 weeks, and they still are number 1 team in the country.
Yeah, I mean, and Isaiah Bond's a little banged up now, so that'll be interesting to see how that goes in the Georgia game. And yeah, man, to your point, this is Brian said it last week. Kind of, we were talking about some of these teams. We're kind of splitting hairs a little bit at the top, and I think you just have to tip the cap and give it 1A, 1B. I think it's really hard to name which one of these teams is better than the other right now. And to your point, I could see Ohio State being over Penn State, but man, I want to recognize the wins, Dave. And if there's a top 5 caliber team like Penn State and they are undefeated, I think they should get the nod over the Ohio State and the Georgias of the world because they do have a loss on the resume. I know they're good losses, because I believe that there is such a thing as good losses. I'd rather have a loss on my resume against Oregon than a loss on my resume against Northern Illinois. So I think there's a case for good losses. But I think if Penn State's a top 5 caliber team and they don't have that loss, then I'm going to give them the nod ahead of Ohio State and Georgia. I think you asked a great question about BYU. There's a world where BYU can be in the top 4 of this conversation. We talked about that a little bit. BYU 6-0, and BYU's got 2 top 25 wins. So yeah, I mean, if somebody comments in our section or leaves a review and wants to make a case for BYU to be in the top 4, I'll listen to you all day on it. I mean, I think that could happen. I think there's a world where we get Miami in the top 5, top 4 right now. I mean, there is so many teams that are up for this discussion that I think like 1 through 8, 1 through 9-ish is like really hard to decipher through right now. And I also think like 9 through 20 is really hard to decipher through right now. You have to really take into consideration what you value more. Do you value good losses more than you value bad losses? Do you value big wins more than you value just wins? I mean, it is tough. I mean, we go through this every week and we have extensive conversations about who we believe in, why we believe in this team, what they've shown us so far, but we also try to make it very clear and try to stay as the same as we can weeks 1 through week 12. We clean the slate, we start from scratch, we give it our eye test based on wins and losses, and we try to give it the most accurate analysis that we can. So, I mean, that's why we welcome an Army, a Navy, and a Vanderbilt into our rankings this week. I mean, I think Vanderbilt, as it sits right now, has a better resume than Ole Miss. Do I think if they line up tomorrow, do I think Vanderbilt can beat Ole Miss? Yes, I do, because the way Vanderbilt's been playing. Do I think Vanderbilt's a better team on paper? No, I don't. But right now, you look at it, Vanderbilt looks really, really good. So, I mean, Dave, we just got to keep doing our thing here. I love Vanderbilt. I like them at 25. I mean, I looked at the AP top 25 after we made our list and saw they didn't have Vanderbilt in it. And, I'm glad we do. I'm glad we're different from them on
That's
that.
disrespectful. That's disrespectful right off the bat. That's disrespectful. You got to put Vanderbilt in there, man. They just turned it around, man. And I've never seen that quick of a turnaround on a college football program like that. Where we were talking about Vanderbilt, and we were like, even when they went to go play Mizzou, we were like, well, we should beat them comfortably, and we did beat them. But again, they gave a heck of a battle, and they've knocked off the number one team already. Like, dude, Vanderbilt's ready to play, man. They're gritty. They're gonna fight you to the death. And
Well, they're playing for each other. They're playing for their coach, man.
I wouldn't be surprised, man, if Vanderbilt finishes off, let's say 10-2. Yes, it would be like wow, but like, man, I wouldn't be like, no, that's not gonna happen. Like, I wouldn't put my money against it. But man, just a great weekend of college football. Let's hope next week's even better. But hey, keep tuning in with us. We're gonna keep bringing you live, good content, quality stuff. I mean, genuine, just hey, straight from the bottom. But again, keep liking, keep commenting, keep sharing.
Hey, real quick, if Vanderbilt wraps it up at 10-2, I had to look at something real quick. That means they beat Texas, Auburn, South Carolina, LSU, and Tennessee. If Vanderbilt wraps it up at 10-2, to the playoffs they go.
Dude, I don't think they beat Texas, but the rest of the teams, I don't know. They might.
Hey, the way Tennessee's playing and the way LSU, I guess, is kind of finding their stride, but LSU is a beatable team. Vanderbilt could give them some fits. I don't want to put the carriage in front of the horse. Vanderbilt's got a lot of football left to play, but I mean, they could win that game, and they could beat Tennessee if they keep playing the way they're playing. Sorry, I just had to throw that out there because I wanted to see what their schedule looks like, because this is just astronomical shit for Vanderbilt right now.
Dude, Vandy's gonna finish off with a decent record, but hey, I hope so, man. Yo, pop it to the moon, baby.
I think their win total was 3.5 or something, Dave. So if they wrap it up at 8-4, 9-3, or hell, even 7-5, hang the hat on that, man.
Absolutely. Hey, that's what happens when you again, Diego Pavia, that's what happens when you put him at quarterback, man. Hey, he's a stud. But hey, speaking of studs, hey, keep sticking with me and Collin. Brian as well. He'll be back with us next week on our next episode. But until now, you got me and Collin. What more could you ask for? But again, keep liking, keep commenting, keep sharing. I know Collin talked about it already earlier in the week on our episode. We are looking to do a raffle here soon. We'll kind of provide more details to that, how you can enter, how you can win, what that looks like. Because, hey, we want you guys sporting our merch. We want you guys letting people know, hey, Deep Threat Sports Network is where it's at, the elite place to get you some quality football content. And just, man, have a good listen while whether you're trying to mow the yard, if you at work and you're typing something up, if you're just hanging out, finally got some free time without the kids. Shoot, if you got the kids, listen to it, man. We're going to bring quality stuff. But I'm going to shoot it over to Collin. He's going to finish it off. And once again, peace.
Hey, like Dave said, keep following along. We appreciate the support that we do have. I love going from place to place or wherever I'm at, and we have people come up to us and say, hey, I like your show. Hey, I like what you guys are doing. Hey, it's really cool. Follow along. Tell your friends. Tell your family. Tell your dog. We've said it before. Watch it with your kids. We try to provide the most accurate and quality content that we can. We're just continue to get better and better here. We've made monumental strides, and things are looking up for us right now. You can follow us at X at DT_sports_, Instagram Deep Threat Sports with a Z, TikTok Deep Threat Sports Network, Facebook Deep Threat Sports Network, YouTube Deep Threat Sports, Spotify Deep Threat Sports. Like I said, continue to support, continue to show your love. We appreciate all the support we've had so far. Dave just mentioned it again. We do have a raffle coming up, going to give away some tumblers with our logo on it. Looking really forward to some stuff like that with you guys. Hey, Dave, come find us later in the week. We're running hot on the bets right now, so make sure you follow along. Make sure you tune into that. Things are looking good for us right now. We're making some money. But until next time, fellas, peace.